Hi everyone, and welcome to the Newman Bond, Newman University's official podcast. We have the pleasure of being with Christy Railsback today. She's an adjunct professor and extraordinaire costume designer. It all started in March 2001 when Christy costumed the imaginary invalid, which, fun fact, was the first ever production performed in the De Matthias Performance Hall on campus. Christy returned in 2004 and has been here ever since, costuming for a hefty mix of theater and vocal music productions alike. In 2013, she began teaching a makeup for the stage or makeup design class, as well as costume design here at Newman, and she's worked in many Wichita area theaters and works wardrobe for touring companies as time allows. So Christy, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. One incredible fact about Christy is that in 2021, just 2 years ago, you won your 10th Mary Jane Teal Award in 20 years for your costume design. And for those who are listening who may not know, Mary Jane Teal is the woman who helped found the Wichita Community Theater and was a key player for more than 40 years. So every year they hold awards that honor her and honor the people in Wichita Community Theater who perform, who create costumes, all of the hard work that goes in behind the scenes. So can you kind of talk us through, I'm curious, when your passion for sewing and creativity and costume design first came into play? Who taught you how to sew, or where does that story begin?
Well, I've been sewing since I was a small child. Probably my grandmothers taught me. My mother always made all of our clothes, and so that was just the thing you did. She made all my clothes, and then when I was in high school, I started making them for myself. There was a time when I had a job where I needed to get dressed up a lot, and so I made, dressed up clothes, which I don't wear anymore. And then I guess I got started, I made a lot of doll clothes, and then, as I had children, I started making their Halloween costumes. It was always kind of a little, I guess I still remember when my son was 5, he wanted a pterodactyl costume, and that was a little bit of a challenge to figure out how to do that. And then when they got into high school, they were both involved in drama, and so of course I volunteered to be part of all that, found out I really liked it, I had a knack for it. So then I started also working in community theater, and things were going well, and I decided I want to enhance my skills, so I went to WSU and got into the theater program there, and I was a grad student there for a while, and I think maybe the turning point in my career, so to speak, was in a short period of time I won my first Mary Jane Teal Award, and then I made Milky White, the cow, for Into the Woods, which got a lot of attention, and then I started getting job offers, and so that was the last time I ever had to look for a job.
Wow, you've been set for life.
Yeah.
Man, so I'm curious, how long does it take you on average to create a costume from start to finish?
That depends entirely on the costume and how detailed it is. If you take into account all the research and planning, for example, I kept track of my hours on Milky White, and that was 70 hours of work.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, but now, first, when you're designing a costume, you have to meet with the director and find out what their concept is. Then you have to know the script, do a lot of research, and then try to figure out what these costumes should look like. How are you going to get there? Where can you find what you need? It's getting harder and harder to find fabrics locally. So on Little Mermaid, I had to mail order a lot of things because unless you want to do quilting or work with fleece, there's not much around here anymore.
Okay. Finding all the materials that you need can be a challenge because if they're not available locally.
So it could take me, an hour or two, or it could take me 40 or 50 hours, depending on the costume. I'm trying to think how much it took me to make your costume for A Man for All Seasons. And it was burgundy colored, wasn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
It was.
I imagine I probably put at least 30 hours into that.
Wow.
Because not only do you know you have to think about what's underneath this costume that holds it into its shape, what kind of petticoats or hoop skirts or panniers on the sides, if it's a corseted look. So it's part of history too. And what did they do with their hair? And I think I made you a French hood.
I think so.
Yeah. Which was complicated. But I was real proud of it. I still have it. I've used it again. And
that's incredible. So since you brought up The Little Mermaid, which was the most recent Newman production that you've that you've provided costumes for, some of the costumes we saw were incredible, whether it was King Triton or the beautiful mystical mermaids or the starfish, the jellyfish with the umbrellas.
Yeah.
You used some very creative materials in there to really kind of bring that story to life. So for you, what was the most memorable aspect of costuming for Disney's The Little Mermaid at Newman?
Well, I thought it was beautiful. All the colors together and the energy and joy that the actors had in this show was just, catching. And I had a great cast to work with, and our crew was great. The thing that gave me the hardest time, this is weird, was the seagulls of all the things. Because I had to figure out what they should look like and how do I get there. And I can't use real feathers because they shed all over the place. And it's only me making this stuff, so it has to be what can I accomplish in a reasonable amount of time. And I made 3 different seagull outfits before I was satisfied with how they looked.
Wow.
But then once I figured out what I wanted to do, it wasn't that difficult. And I thought they looked great, especially Austin when he was Scuttle, and he really brought that character to life.
Definitely. Well, I think the costumes played a huge part in that, so kudos to you.
Thank you.
How many hours do you think it took to costume the whole show?
It's hard to say, maybe 200. I didn't really keep track. Sometimes I'd rather not know.
That's fair.
Because we started working on this in October. So it was a long, hard work. Deanna and I started talking about options, and the students started rehearsing in October. They gave up some of their semester break to come in and rehearse. And I think they were just about perfect. I don't know what they could have done that would have been better.
I'd have to agree with you. As an audience member, I was blown away. I kept hearing that this was one of Newman's best shows that they'd produced, and a lot of compliments toward the costumes. So again, kudos to you for all of your work on that. So I know that there've probably been so many shows that you've costumed for, whether it was at Newman or beyond. Do you have an estimate of how many individual costumes you've created over the years?
I don't know, maybe a couple of thousand.
Wow.
I mean, because we're talking about over 20 years here. Well, yeah, more than 20 actually, if you count all those Halloween costumes and
That's true.
the middle school and high school costumes. And
Man, do you have like a highlight reel of your favorite costumes that come to mind if you were to name like 3 favorites?
specific costumes or a genre?
I guess we could go with genre, and you could mention a few in each.
Well, I really like to do fantasy things.
Okay.
So when I did Midsummer Night's Dream with all the fairies, that was exciting for me. In Big Fish, we had a lot of fantasy costumes. The big challenge for me there was the giant, keeping him up on his stilts. And those took a lot of work to get them to work just right. And one time he fell off of them on stage during a performance, but the audience apparently kind of thought that was part of the show, because they talked about it afterwards, and I guess he just gracefully went over. And then some other actors came and helped him back up on his feet again. I didn't get to see it because I was in the other room trying to repair the ripped wedding dress to get it ready for that evening's performance. So,
man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So fantasy would be your favorite genre?
Well, yeah, and I also like the late 1700s and around the turn of the century, like late 1800s. And I also like doing stuff in the 1920s. I don't know, there's just a lot of... I like doing historical stuff if I have enough time to be able to get it all done.
Well, I think you've done a great job of doing that as well. We wrote a story recently, not too long ago, about your project with PBS documentary Contested Planes, written by Ken Spurgeon and Deb Goodrich.
He also directed it.
Okay, awesome.
And
So
produced it. So,
can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that experience and how you were approached with that opportunity and what that entailed?
well, I got involved in it because of Mark Manette. He was one of the co-producers, and he wanted me to come on board. And so I had an interview with Ken, and he said, come on board. It was a really fun experience for me, most of it. It was filmed in 3 stages. There was town scenes filmed in Cowtown, and then some more scenes were filmed out in western Kansas near Oakley, and then the third part of it was filmed near Amarillo, Texas, because Ken was trying to film. This was based on a true story about a family immigrating from Tennessee or Georgia, somewhere down there, to western Kansas to try to be farmers. And they were very, very poor. It took them like 2 years to get from Georgia to western Kansas, because I stopped along the way and stayed with some relatives and worked. And they were almost to their destination when they were attacked by a band of Cheyenne. And half the family was killed and some of the girls were taken captive. And it was a lot about the story of their captivity and their rescue. And so I was involved at Cowtown, and we probably filmed about 5 days there. And then we went to western Kansas, and he put us all up in a motel and fed us all the time, and it was exciting. We were guests of there was a ranch, I can't remember the name of it now. They raised red Angus cattle, and a lot of it was filmed on his land and in his barn, which was kind of our headquarters. And I really enjoyed the western Kansas part because I got to meet lots of interesting people. And all of the Cheyenne actors were actual Native Americans.
Wow.
And many of them had their own costumes, and I was really intrigued to ask them about, what does this symbolize? What is the significance of this? Why do you have all these feathers? Because he told me that, like, they have to earn these feathers, and the beading, and it was so beautiful, some of it, so intricate.
Yeah.
And, our biggest problem out there was the wind, because there was one day that we could not film because it was too windy, because it was too noisy. And so then they went out and practiced riding their horses. And then we were planning to have a fire, and we couldn't do that because it was too windy. But it calmed down enough that on the last day we could have the burning of the covered wagon, which was very, very dramatic. And many of us, were nearly in tears.
Yeah, that would have been an emotional experience to be a part of telling that type of story. Are there, I imagine with a lot of the things that are kind of out of your control, like if you're creating a PBS documentary or a movie where you're filming outside and you're facing the elements in these costumes that also have to be functional and give a correct nod to the time period.
Yeah.
What kind of unconventional materials have you used in your costumes over the years?
Plastic. I don't know. Styrofoam. I made a giant spider costume one time, and the base of it was a big trash bag filled with styrofoam peanuts. This was a big spider costume. I made it for.
Like how? Like 6 feet?
Yeah.
10 feet?
A person was inside of it, but the legs were extensions with PVC pipes covered with swim noodles. Swim noodles are great for lots of things. And you have to get creative. And it's called Extica, Spider God of the Amazon, written by Misty Maynard and performed at Keachai Playhouse.
Oh my gosh.
And that was also one of the things I won a Mary Jane Teal Award for.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Are all of your costumes still pretty much in existence? Do you keep them at home? Do you hand them off to different theater companies
it depends.
to use? For those big costumes like the giant spider, is that still
It's at my
Keachai?
house because there's not really a place for it at Keachai either. Ursula costume lives on the top bunk of my daughter's bunk bed in her old room. So, because Deanne asked me to keep it because there's no place for it. My whole basement is costume stuff.
Is that your workspace too? Is that where you delve in, or what is that kind of like?
I try to keep my work down there, but I often haul it upstairs and work in the kitchen because the light's really good there. But every room in the basement is filled with my costume stuff, except for the shop. And it has some of my costume stuff in it. My husband gets a little corner for his own space,
That's funny. So outside of historical projects and movies, I heard that you've also gotten the chance to work with like musical artists who are performing in town, such as Pink, the artist, musical performer, pop music performer, I should say. And I know you have a fun story about being called kind of to the scene when she had a wardrobe malfunction, and you got to help, bring her back.
Well, there were several people working on this.
Oh, okay.
Their costumes were falling apart, and the wardrobe people were quite distressed about this because the costumes were new. And so it was 12 hours of wonderful. I don't know. I worked all day repairing things, and then I came back that night and could watch the concert free. But it was standing room only, and Pink impressed me so much. She is just solid muscle. She was swinging upside down all around Intrust Bank Arena, singing at the same time. Another thing about her that impressed me was, we all ate in the cafeteria together, and she came in, and most of the stars take all their food to their room to eat. And she walked in, and I didn't even know who she was at first because she had on a sweatsuit and no makeup. And she sat down and she walked to the end of the line and not the front of the line. And then she sat in there with her band members and other members of her crew, just eating like a regular person.
That's awesome.
And her family travels with her too, her husband and her 2 kids. And after this, here in Wichita, they went to Australia, and it was called the Beautiful Tragedy Tour. And Netflix made a documentary about it. And so I was so excited to watch this and see the things that I worked on in that documentary. That was really cool for me.
Oh my gosh. Are there other projects that you've gotten to be a part of that have been on the big screen or streamed?
Well, I don't know. I've worked for a lot of touring companies or individuals that come through here, like Carrie Underwood, and Weird Al Yankovic, and the band Rush, and the band Breaking Benjamin. Also, one of the favorite shows I ever worked on was The Lion King. For me as a costumer to be able to get up close to those costumes and examine how they're made and feel the fabrics, and that was hard work because we had to haul all these animal parts all up and down the stairs all the time because at the beginning all the animals make their parade down through the center of the auditorium, and so we had to get them all up on the 3rd floor to make their parade down. And after a while, those hyena legs get kind of heavy.
I can imagine.
And I was also in charge of the back end of the rhinoceros, and so.
Yeah, that's really special to be a part of that. And that was just a few years ago, right? 5 years or so ago?
I'm not sure. It was the first tour that came through.
Okay. That's amazing.
And they wanted me to work for a month, but I couldn't take that long. So I did a week fill-in for somebody, and I had to help the actor who played Pumbaa the warthog. And his costume was huge, and it was a struggle. His body weighed 25 pounds and the head weighed 25 pounds, and I couldn't get the head through the doorway without opening it up, the jaws.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Then we had to strap him into it, and then one of my jobs was to follow him around with a little stool so he could sit down whenever he had a chance off stage, because
Wow, these are the things you don't think about as an audience member. We see all these beautiful costumes in the show, and we pay and we enjoy, and then we leave. What are some of the behind-the-scenes elements that go into bringing the costumes, giving them that final touch before they're out on stage?
Fast changes are the biggest challenge. I think one of my first jobs was working Beauty and the Beast on a touring company, and my job was to lay on the floor and put Belle's right shoe on. It took 6 people to change her.
Oh my gosh.
And then, it was like, she stands in this one spot, she gets all of her clothes pulled off, her wig, her jewelry, and then she steps into the dress and it gets pulled up, and then she steps, into the shoes. And
assembly line style.
Yeah, and gets a new wig, and then it's my job to pick up this beautiful dress she just took off and haul it off stage and put it in a special case so it doesn't get damaged, because it costs like, I don't know how much. I love to ask how much things cost. They said the fabric cost $50 a yard to make this. It was like yellow silk.
Wow.
And like, for Lion King, Scar's head cost $3,500 each one. And there were 2 of them, because there was this, 2 Scars, because they couldn't do the same actor every performance. And there was, a dress in Wicked that cost $14,000. When I worked on Cinderella, I was told that every one of the ball gowns cost at least $5,000, and nobody was allowed near Cinderella's magic changing dress except there was one person that traveled with her that took care of everything, because I really wanted to see how they put this dress together that came down into a regular dress as she spun around.
Man, that's incredible.
For every person you see on the stage, there's at least 6 people backstage taking care of things. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine that with all of the work that you've done with costumes and helping actors prepare for their big role and the big costume debuts, that it almost gives you a greater appreciation of the shows that you see.
Definitely.
I'd assume.
Yeah.
Are there any shows that come to mind that for you as a viewer, it just blew you away when you saw the costumes?
Well, yeah, the first time I saw The Lion King was in London, and that just blew me away. It was just gorgeous. And also I loved Phantom of the Opera because they had all these masquerade clothes, and there was, the boat went around in the fog and on a track, and that just fascinated me. I always want to know how things work. Like with the wings, in Wicked, there were all the monkeys with their wings, and those were like umbrellas. And so, I learned how to put on a flying monkey suit. I have never had to do that more than that time, but it was a challenge. And then they had to have their safety wires on. Some of them flew, some of them didn't, but they all either climbed up on top of a
some sort of platform?
A wall-like thing. They climbed up, they were up there squealing, doing their monkey stuff, but they had to have a safety harness on just in case they fell.
Wow. There's so many things that go into productions that you just don't think about, but...
In The Little Mermaid, there was so much stuff backstage that they could not cross from one side of the stage to the other backstage. So to get from one side to the other, they had to run all the way through the shop and up the other side. And sometimes that was really tight. Like at the end, Ariel and Prince Eric walk off one side of the stage. She has to run all the way around to the other, change into her wedding dress, and hop up on the boat to come out. And she had 3 or 4 people helping her change. It all had to be choreographed carefully.
It takes a team.
Yeah.
It sure does. Man. So I'm impressed by the amount of shows that I've seen at Newman and been a part of at Newman that you've gotten a costume. And I know that you are probably one of the most creative forces on campus with all that you're able to come up with. Are there any costumes that you have done either at Newman or beyond that you found to be a really fun challenge that you're just most proud of?
Probably Milky White the cow. I was really proud of her. She was pretty, and the costume became a real character to me. And the person who was Milky White was inside this cow costume with stilts on the front legs, and the whole head was articulated, strapped onto the actor's head. And this cow had to do special things like walk and go up and down stairs and die and get milked.
Gosh.
And yeah, and then I had to teach the actor how to walk like a cow. But it was fun. It was a challenge, but it was fun, and I was really proud of what I accomplished.
Good for you.
And it was also kind of like a turning point in my career.
Because you could see what you could do, and So other than stilts, were there any elements to the costume that you want to share? Like what types of materials you used to construct Milky?
Well, the head was carved out of styrofoam, and the script said it was a skinny old cow, so I built a backbone down the back of her back and padded out the legs and up on the shoulders. And also Milky White had to eat things. So I had to figure out how we're going to do that. So I put a zipper in the shoulder, and she's like Jack's pet. And so Jack's there stroking her, and he pantomimes, he opens up the zipper, and then they can pantomime feeding her Cinderella's shoe and Little Red Riding Hood's cape and some corn. I don't know, there was a bunch of stuff she had to eat to make magic milk that would turn the witch young again.
Wow, that's amazing. Just so much magic that goes into the
And we also did Into the Woods here at Newman too.
That's
and
right.
I borrowed the cow. And we had some wonderful special effects that Ben Youngke did for when the witch drinks the magic potion and goes from being, an ugly, evil person to being this beautiful young witch again. And I think the transition took 8 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
Because Ben had all this smoke go up. And so then she just turned around and her beautiful outfit was on underneath her her ugly outfit, and she had 2 people helping her change. She had on long gloves with fingernails on them and had to change wigs, and she just stood there and they pulled her gloves off, and then she got all ready and she turned around and went back out.
Oh my gosh.
And sometimes that smoke would make people cough.
Oh, I'm sure. Wow.
I think there were some fireworks also.
There might have been. I think that was the year before I got here, but there have been so many amazing shows that you've been a part of, and it's inspiring to see you continue to make such a big impact on our students and obviously the audience members who come to support them.
Well, that was when I made Ariel. I mean, the dress that Ariel wore as her wedding dress was worn by another actress for Into the Woods as Cinderella's dress.
That's right. I've seen pictures too, yeah.
It was a beautiful dress. I was just happy to get to use it again.
I know.
Oh, and I used it again for Rebecca when she was a princess in some other show, and we thought it was kind of special that it was the first costume she wore at Newman and the last costume she wore at Newman.
That's so neat. For some of the shows that you've made, you've gotten to kind of reuse or reincorporate some of the costumes that you've designed. I feel like you almost deserve like a little museum to, give full credit to all of those costumes that might not get their debut on stage again. But I'm curious, are you working on any costume projects now? What's your next big costume assignment?
It would be probably The Real Inspector Hound, which is kind of a satire of Agatha Christie murder mysteries, but it's really crazy. And then we'll have that opens on end of March. I think it's like the 28th or the 29th. And then there'll be the big spring musical review that Deanne always produces, and I don't know much about it yet. A couple of students are writing it, and she gave them the songs she wanted to use and a kind of a general theme, and they're putting it all together. I think it's okay if I say what it's about. It's like a time-traveling jukebox.
Oh, fun.
And she wants to do pieces from the 1940s and from Hamilton, and I'm not sure what all other shows she's planning to highlight.
Something big, though. That show's always a blast at the end of the year.
And fortunately, I already have some Hamilton costumes.
Oh, perfect.
That I made for Keachai Playhouse.
Well, then they get to come back out and make their big entrance on stage. It's wonderful.
So I'm happy to use those again.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you would like to share with our listeners?
I've also worked for Music Theater of Wichita. I worked there for 8 years solid, and then I just came in part-time in the summers. I worked from, I think, 2004 to 2019 when COVID came and changed everything after that. And I haven't been back since then because I just haven't. And as my responsibilities at Newman have increased, I have been more protective of my summers. And I don't want to spend my whole summer down in a cold basement.
That's fair. That's very fair. Well, thank you so much, Christy. Okay. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for tuning in and listening. You've been listening to the Newman Bond, Newman's official podcast. And we release new episodes every first and third Tuesday of the month. So be sure to tune in to YouTube to get those. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Christy.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.